Kids, it's Mrs. Shalley. Hey, so I'm in my kitchen. There's the word family backwards. Sunflowers. Anyway, if you hear barking, it'll be a dog. Okay, so I wanted to go over some of the reading, some of the important, lines and things in of Mice and Men. So if you want to get that book out, I'm on page 85, which, by the way, is the year I graduated from high school. 85, we don't take no jive. So if you will look on, please, page 85. This is the beginning of chapter 5. This is where what? Lenny kills the puppy. So, right in the middle of the page where it says, well, actually it's more at the top. And Lenny said softly to the puppy, "Why do you got to get killed? You ain't so little as mice. I didn't bounce you hard." He bent the pup's head up and looked in its face, and he said to it, "Now maybe George ain't gonna let me tend no rabbits if he finds out you got killed." He scooped a little hollow and laid the puppy in it and covered it with hay out of sight. But he continued to stare at the mound he'd made. He said, "This ain't no bad thing like I get to hide in the brush. Oh no, this ain't. I'll tell George I found it dead." Okay, so if you think back to earlier in the novel, the killing of the puppy is foreshadowed when we find out that he's killing the mouse. Now, keep that in mind. Is the puppy foreshadowing something else? Okay, so bottom of 86. So now we've got Curly's wife back there in the barn. And at the bottom it says she knelt in the hay beside him. "Listen," she said, "all the guys got a horseshoe tenement going on. It's only about 4 o'clock. None of them guys is going to leave that tenement. Why can't I talk to you? I never get to talk to nobody. I get awful lonely." Lenny said, "Well, I ain't supposed to talk to you or nothing." "I get lonely," she said. "You can't talk to people. You can talk to people, but I can't talk to nobody but Curly. Elsie gets mad. How'd you like not to talk to anybody?" So I want you to think back about how this conversation between Lenny and Curly's wife is similar to the one that Lenny had with Crooks. Crooks and Curly's wife are both in the same boat. They're both lonely. So one of the questions I'm going to ask you in the journal is, how are they similar? Obviously, they're both lonely because they don't talk to people, and people ignore them and don't treat them, don't want them around. So then the question is going to be, what is Steinbeck saying? What is he trying to show us? So I'll word that question in a better light, but that's something that I do want you to think about. So then she asks about the puppy, and then we go on to page 88. This whole first full paragraph at the top of 88 is really important. She tells us about her life here, so I want to look at that. So Lenny says at the top of the page, "Well, George says you'll get us in a mess," meaning George says that if I talk to you, that you're going to get us in trouble. And so she says, "Aw, nuts," she said. "What kind of harm am I doing to you? Seems like none of them cares how I gotta live. I tell you, I ain't used to living like this. I could have made something of myself." She said darkly, "Maybe I will yet." And then her words tumbled out in a passion of communication, as though she hurried before her listener could be taken away. "I lived right in Salinas," she said. "Come there when I was a kid. Well, a show come through, and I met one of the actors. He says I could go with that show. But my old lady wouldn't let me. She says because I was only 15, but the guy says I coulda. If I'd went, I wouldn't be living like this, you bet." So, explain that a little bit. So at the time period, they didn't have a little town like Salinas would not have had a theater where they were constantly having shows. They had traveling shows that would come through and put on performances, sort of like a circus, would today, or a concert. But these people would come in and actually put on a show where there was dancing and singing, sort of like a musical review. And so she's saying that once they came, they said she could be a star, but her mother wouldn't let her because she was only 15. So, the question is, was that guy being truthful, do you think? Could she have been a star? Would he have had a different motive? That might be another question that I ask you to ponder in tomorrow's journal, or actually today's. I'm recording this on Tuesday, but you'll read it on Wednesday, so I don't know. All right, so then she goes on to tell her story now. Lenny stroked the pup back and forth. We're going to have a little place in Rabbits, he explained. She went on with her story quickly before she should be interrupted. Another time I met a guy and he was in pictures, meaning movies. He says he was going to put me in the movie, says I was a natural. Soon's he got back to Hollywood, he was going to write to me about it. She looked closely at Lenny to see whether she was impressing him. I never got that letter. I always thought my old lady stole it. Well, I wasn't going to stay no place where I couldn't get nowhere and make something of myself. And where they stole the letters. I asked her if she stole it too, and she says no. So I married Curly. Met him out of the Riverdance Palace that same night. All right, what does that tell us about his wife and about their relationship? The fact that she gets offered, she's at the Riverdance Palace, and she gets, he was going to write her a letter, this man, and say, I'm going to make a movie for you, and didn't turn out, so she just married Curly. Top 8 and 89. Well, I ain't told this to nobody before. Maybe I oughtn't to. I don't like Curly. He ain't a nice fella. Then she goes on about all these things she could have done. Now, there are some similarities here with some other characters as well. Why is she confessing to Lenny? Why does she reach out to him and pour out her whole soul? Something to think about. Also, where else in the novel have we heard, if I wasn't with, she says, if I wasn't with Curly, I could do this and I'd have nice things and et cetera, et cetera. Somebody else in the novel has said that. If I didn't have blank, my life would be better. Which, of course, is George saying that about Lenny at the beginning. So it's an example of how the people we choose to be with may not make us better people, may not make our lives better. And that's one of the things that I always think is important for young people to think about is when you choose your friends or the people you date, the people you're around, if they don't make you feel better about yourself, if they don't bring out the best in you, then it's probably not a good relationship. It's not a healthy relationship, So, I encourage you to think about that. Make sure the people that you choose to be around bring out the best. Okay, so that's 89. We go to 90, and Lenny talks about his Aunt Clara, which is the first time that we really hear much about her from Lenny. In the middle of the page, she says, he said, Lenny chuckled with pleasure on 90. Lenny chuckled with pleasure. You bet, by God, he cried happily, and I had some too. He's talking about silk. A lady give me some, and that lady was my own Aunt Clara. She give it right to me, about this big a piece. I wished I'd had that velvet right now. A frown came over his face. I lost it, he said. I ain't seen it for a long time. Curly's wife laughed at him. You're nuts, she said. But you're kind of a nice fella, just like a big baby. But a person can see kind of what you mean. When I'm doing my hair sometimes, I just sit and stroke it because it's so soft. To show how she did it, she ran her fingers over the top of her head. Some people got kind of coarse hair, she said complacently. Take Curly, his hair's just like wire, but mine is soft and fine, because I brush it a lot. That makes it fine. Here, feel right here. She took Lenny's hand and put it on her head. Feel right around there and see how soft it is. So a couple of things, girls, this is an old school thing, but we were used to be told that if you should brush your hair 100 strokes every night. 100 strokes every night. So I can remember when I was a little girl, I'd sit on the floor and lean against my mother's knees, and she brushed my hair 100 strokes every night. And she wasn't very gentle, I'll tell you that right now. Well, it turns out that really doesn't, I don't think it does anything. I don't think it's good for your hair, quite frankly. Anyway, That's why it was kind of a common thing. All right, that was just a, side note. Okay, so now, do you get the feeling that something's going to happen here? She's got this nice hair and it's soft, and now she says, touch it. And bottom of the page, Letty's big fingers fell to stroking her hair. Don't you muss it up, she said. Mussing it up meaning mess. Oh, that's nice. And then he continues, and she says, let go, you let go. Lenny was in a panic. His face was contorted. She screamed then, and Lenny's other hand closed over her mouth and nose. Please don't, he begged. Oh, please don't do that. George will be mad. So I won't go on and read, but obviously what happens is he's trying to shut her up because he doesn't want to get in trouble, and he kills her. So now he has killed the mice, the puppy, and now a woman. So if you go back and think about the beginning of the novel, Steinbeck is constantly foreshadowing this very event happening by, upping the ante on what Lenny's going to kill. Okay, how many pages was that? Quick math. 85 plus 7 is 92. Okay, so just a couple more. Top of 92. So he's broken her neck. And then let's look at his reaction a little bit. He pawed up the hay. Top of 92. He pawed up the hay until it partly covered her. From outside the barn came a cry of men and the double clang of shoes on metal. For the first time, Lenny became conscious of the outside. He crouched down in the hay and listened. I done a real bad thing, he said. I shouldn't have did that. George will be mad. And he said, and hide in the bush till he come. He gonna be mad in the bush till he come. That's what he said. Lenny went back and looked at the dead girl. The puppy lay close to her. Lenny picked it up. I'll throw him away, he said. It's bad enough like it is. He put the pup under his coat, and he crept to the barn wall and peered out between the cracks toward the horseshoe game. And then he crept around the end of the last manger and disappeared. A manger being like a stall in the horse barn. Okay, so now I wish that we could have a discussion and you can answer questions. Maybe if this goes on after break. And Lord help us. Do you want this to go on after break? I don't. I can't take it. Nonetheless. What was I going to say? Oh, it's interesting that Lenny knows what he did was wrong once the action is over. But while he's doing it, he does not have that sense of cause and effect or reasoning ability. And there's an example today where we have this. Is like when a 12-year-old kills someone, or even like a 9-year-old, and they'll want to try that child as an adult. That's one of the issues that a jury or attorneys, a judge are faced with is someone that age able to right from wrong, but do you understand consequences? Do you understand cause and effect? Do you understand, do you have the brain connections and maturity to understand that, if you squeeze something too hard, you're going to kill it? Okay, and then I think we'll stop there for today. And then we'll look at some more pages tomorrow. And then we'll go to the end of the novel on Thursday. But I wanted to touch base with you guys. And I'll have a journal for you here in a minute. I'm going to post over those pages, 85 to 92 in there. Some things for you to think about. Sort of put yourself in the shoes. Because we've got several characters here who are kind of misplaced in society. We have Crooks, he's black. We have Curly's wife, who is a woman. We have Lenny, who is mentally disabled. And, in some ways, is George a displaced person? Is Curly? Some things to think about, because that's one of the themes Steinbeck has, is the people who live on the fringes of society. How do we treat people who are on the fringes of society? How do we treat the disabled today? How do we treat black people today? How do we treat women today? That's another question I'm going to ask you. So, can I do something just so that, you don't feel like completely lost and away from things? Listen to this, kids. So that was, roll out because we're done with the talk here. And then also, if you think that this e-learning thing is fun and we like being away from you, well, guess what? You are
wrong.
And then tomorrow, maybe we'll talk about practice. Okay. Anyway, we wish we were at school with you guys. And if you need something, let us know. I don't know. We will put some more work up. So keep chugging away. And my MacBook's about to die, so I'm going to stop. Bye.